So hello good people of the internet, this is Tommy Kelly and this is once again the Tommy Kelly podcast. And on this podcast, I first of all want to say that most of you will probably be aware that last week there was no podcast. And the reason for that was that the 40 Servants was the year old, and all the Halloween stuff and the birthday party and the sales and all that. And I just ran out of time ultimately in the end and just kind of said I could rush something out or I could just not kill myself to get all the things done. So apologies for none last week. But we'll get on to this one. In this one, I want to talk a bit about my kind of mind palace isn't the correct word. My sort of astral temple, which is a bit not the right word either, but probably the best description that I use to interact with the 40 servants when I'm doing journeying or active imagination. So yeah, let's get into that. So for those who don't really know what active imagination or journeying is, so the best way to describe it is that it's like daydreaming, but with a purpose, with the hope that eventually that it starts to have a life of its own. And one of the hallmarks and one of the key points of how when you're interacting with people during this, or beings or spirits, is how do you know when it's it's not just your mind, or well, it's possibly all your mind, but how do you know it's not just you thinking these things up? And Jung said it's when they start knowing things either that you don't know or give you answers that you didn't know, or to start behaving in a way that you're not aware, you're not controlling it, that they have become their own personalities, their own type of, kind of have their own inertia, their own kind of feel to them, their own personality, their own consciousness in a sense, but that's too far maybe. And it's very similar to when you're writing a book or you're writing a story, or if you're doing a comic or anything where you've created characters. And after a while, so many authors will come across a thing where the characters start having a life of their own and start doing things that weren't planned, or saying things, or develop particular characters, and you'll find that situations that you wanted them to originally go in, you just can't put them in that situation now because the character won't allow it. And excuse me, I'm drinking Coke Zero again, and I got given it on Facebook for having Coke Zero because it contains aspartame. I'm aware it's a terrible thing for you to drink, but I just like it, and that's how it goes. So that's why I riffed it there. My apologies all round for drinking Coke and for riffing on the podcast. So yeah, active imagination then would be kind of like a meditation, like a guided meditation, only you're not listening to a tape, say, or a tape, showing my age, or you're not listening to someone talking through it. There's not someone in the room or on a recording telling you. You're kind of doing it yourself, and in a sense you're trying to let your mind, or whatever it is, take over, and it to be not running the show, but it to be creating the thing. It's hard to explain, and I was trying to think about today how would I explain it, and it's something, I think, one of those things that you kind of have to experience more than say it. But it's like daydreaming, and to start it, you drop the day, or you drop your thoughts or whatever, and you just kind of let your mind be free, as Morpheus said to Neo. Sounds like a joke. And just let your mind go. Now, but the other thing of it is you can set up places in this active imagination that are like astral temples, palaces, or mind palaces. A mind palace is more people use to remember things. So you'd have like a room, and if you needed to remember stuff, you'd put things in certain parts of the room so that when you would go back to try to remember, like people's names, you just walk around the room and go, oh yes, John, because John was the lamp, or whatever. So it's not really a mind palace in that way, this thing I'm going to talk about. But so people set up astral temples where they will do rituals, they'll act out things, or Jung used to talk to people, like he did a lot of advisors and stuff like that, where he would go to these places and talk to whoever his different beings that he talked to. So my one, when I want to deal with the 40 servants on the astral plane, or in my imagination, or whatever way we want to put this, in the inside of my mind, I have it all laid out in a kind of a train. And the reason why I use a train is because I find trains extremely comforting, and as a fan of Sherlock Holmes and, you know, Murder on the Orient Express and all this kind of, I have a kind of a love, or as we'd say in Ireland, a graw for old trains, and that kind of feeling that brings you back when you see it. And I've recently seen the new Murder on the Orient Express, and the train on it's wonderful. And surprisingly, it's very close to what I had in my mind for my 40 Servants train. And so I stole a few bits first, and a bit of it layered and added it to it. And that's the thing, you can build on your astral temple or whatever it is you want, whatever you decide it. And it doesn't have to be a train, it can be a room, it can be somewhere you've been before. And the more detail you add to it, the more real it becomes after a while or whatever. So this train anyway, I started by getting onto it on a platform, you know, an old platform, and it's raining, and I'm soaked, and I'm getting into the comfort of my particular carriage that I have, and that's how I mind myself into this kind of to get into this active imagination thing. Start by being on the platform. The train arrives, it's raining, I'm wet, I have a coat on, you know, one of those big collared coats or whatever, and wrap it around me, and I get in, and I'll explain that where each of them is. Not all of the 40 Servants are on this train. Some of them are stops along the way. But I will go through each of them with my deck. If you're watching this video here, you can see. If you're if you're listening to this on SoundCloud, then I just took out my deck. So, all of the 40 Servants will have a room on a dedicated room, like carriage room, for each of them, but that doesn't really work with a lot of them, and a lot of them are more suited to be in different places, but I'll explain as I go along. And let me see. Best place to start, because I want to start with a few. Right, well, we start here. And we have the healer, and obviously the healer is about healing and all that. So her room has a bed in it, it has like a drip, it has some heart monitor stuff and all that. And so if I feel I need for a healing or whatever, or I need to recuperate or whatever, I'll visualize myself getting on this train, going in, arriving at the, train takes off, go to the healer's carriage, which obviously has her sigil on the door, and enter, and she will be there, and I lie down on the bed, and she attaches like the heart stuff and the medical stuff to me, and then I just visualize myself, being healed and getting stuff like that. So that would be the healer's room, would have a kind of like, but it still has that kind of old time kind of feel to it. So it's not modern technology or whatever. And there's a light coming down from above that is a healing energy. The father's room is kind of, there's a some of them are quite similar. There's like shelves, and there's books, and there's a desk on it, but mostly the father hangs out in the kind of bar area or in the the restaurant type area. So if I was going to talk to him, it would be there that I would go, rather than his room. And I kind of visual that when I'm not there, he's talking to some of the other ones, like him and the Tinker and the Guru have these great conversations on the train or whatever. The Depleted, which is the tree, is obviously a stop. So if I was going to work with the Depleted, needed to get on the train, get into my room or whatever, and then the whistle blows and I stop and I go outside to the tree, to the Depleted, and would work with it that way. Mother 2 would have her own room, but sorry, just checking time. It would also be a stop because of the background image of the, and her kind of connection with the earth and stuff like that. So she would be a stop on the route as well. The Devil is a plain black room, no lights. You go in, he's just there under like a spotlight coming down on him. So just very, and almost, if you've seen that film Under the Skin, where you go into the black room, it's like that. So there's like it's not like a painted carriage or anything. It's just pure blackness that goes on for infinity. The Explorer is actually a room, even though it seems that it wouldn't be. So it's kind of, he's there, and there's like space kind of projected in the room like a hologram, and he would be in the center of it. And it's interesting that he's in the room. You'd feel that that's it. Maybe it's too far away for a train to get up into space. That's why it's in my head. The Carnal is like a boudoir. It's pink. There's lots of lace. There's a huge bed in the middle. There's lots of like curtains, you know, pink, big thing, like a, in my head, like an old kind of Persian princesses, or the, you know, like, what I was going to say, it's not ladies in waiting, it's like, you know, the concubines and stuff, like that kind of room. If you've seen Marco Polo, there's kind of like a section of the palace that is that, so it's a bit like that, but it's all pink, and it's all, you know, a room, kind of a bit as well, I suppose, a bit like Firefly. The opposer kind of walks round the train, even though he would have his own room, and he's also on the platform, because the card itself looks like he's on a platform, and he looks like a conductor type, you know, the person gets in your way and annoys you, and, you know, it's super important and stuff like that from the train. But so he'd be walking around the train, he'd be the guy who'd be annoying you about, you know, you're in the wrong carriage or whatever, just trying to get at you and all that thing. So he moves around. So his room, I'm not really sure. His room would be kind of like, I suppose, like a bureaucratic, an office, like the conductor's office or whatever. The balancer is outside. She's a stop, so I would stop by these mountains, and it would be the exact split on the earth where one half of the world is night, one half is day. Obviously doesn't exist, but I can do that. The adventurer is outside the train, but still on the train, so she's floating above the front of the train, of the carriage, the engine, the very first carriage, you know, with the engine, the actual train itself, rather than carriages. So she's there above it. I'll come back to that. The desperate obviously has his own room, but he's at the bar just most of the time. So he would have his hands down on the bar, in you know, the restaurant carriage at the end of the thing. But if I went to his room, if it was a thing, it would be just a desk in a very darkened room. Possibly like empty bottles of alcohol and stuff round, but, you know, very little, but just, and again, that light coming down from above. The protester would be a stop, and it's on a platform, like, so you've stopped at another station and there's people around, all the protesting, very like the image, and would be there, and so I'd go and talk to her. Again, would have a room if I wanted to on the train. The gatekeeper is the guy, when I go on to the train, who welcomes me into the train. He would be standing at the end of my carriage, like say you're in first class, whatever, and he's the guy, he's the, not the conductor, but like, you know, you're the guy who looks after this carriage, whatever, and, you know, allows you into the different parts of the train and stuff like that. So he's just kind of sitting down at the end of, has his own seat, his own area at the end of the carriages. And he would let you into the, you know, like into the bar or the restaurant or into the back. There's a kind of a back thing of this train where you can see, you know, where the train is going. I'll come back to that. The conductor, there's a music room, obviously, and he would be conducting a small kind of orchestra, 4-piece orchestra, quintet sort of a thing in his room. And it's cool. The messenger is a step or a stop again, and it would be the tree. And if I needed something, message, whatever, tell, and the messenger would go off from the thing, you know, from the stop, from the tree. The media is TV sitting in the middle of a room. Quite simple. Sometimes it could be in the bar, but I don't like it because it kind of takes away from the old-fashioned kind of feel to the whole thing. The librarian has her own room, and it's a library. It's, you know, shockingly, that's what it is. The master, again, could sometimes see him outside, but mostly it would be inside in the room. And when I see him, he doesn't necessarily, when I see him outside, obviously he has the sky, but inside he doesn't have the sky behind him. He would be just in a kind of darkened room with the halo lighting up the whole room. And he has a cloak on, so that's interesting. The guru, I always talk to the guru sitting at one of the tables in the restaurant. He sits beside the window. I would assume if he, in his room, it would be kind of similar to the Father and the Thinker, in that it would be like a desk, some books, and that sort of thing. The protector is outside the train at all times, flying around, and also has a perch just outside the window of my cabin. The planet is a stop, and it's like the end stop where you come to the end of the Earth, you know, and the railway line goes right to it, and then the planet is in space just in front of it. So I'll get out of the train and talk to the planet. The eye is a stop, obviously enough. It's go out the pyramid's eye, it's a stop. The road opener is kind of at the front of the train, hovering above it, arms outstretched, clearing the way in front of everything. The adventure, I was saying before, hovers kind of similar, but the area but behind the road opener. The road opener is right at the very front. Very jolly, very happy, very fun. The monk is like a meditation room, very dark, typical Zen kind of a room. You go in, you stare at the wall, like the Zazen thing. He's there, he can talk to me. He's very quiet, doesn't talk to me. May talk to you, which is fine, but he never speaks to me. Just makes himself known by what he does. And you go in, it's silence, it's to get away from everything. Very nice room, very calming room. The Seer is a room, it's like a fortune teller's room. And, you know, like the old kind of standard cliche fortune teller room. So, you know, caravan type of thing that you'd see in old, like the Wizard of Oz thing, isn't it? Am I right there? The fortune teller? Is she a fortune teller? You know what I'm on about. The sun is the sun in the sky, and beats down on me as I have to go out the back of the train, and so I can see it from anywhere, but still on the train. It's not a stop. The dead can be both a stop in a kind of a graveyard type area, or in a room that looks very similar to the card, where she's just standing like a statue, and the kind of orange spins behind her, and you can see all the space stuff, all the stars, all that in that. So that's an interesting one. Contemplator is the same. It's a room with the lights kind of moving around him, but he's in the lotus position, and he's floating very like Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen on, you know, John on Mars, that whole thing. That's kind of what it feels like to me. The idea is the plant that, or whatever it is, the flower in the middle of a room, beaming energy. You know, you go in, you come out, it's like you absorb ideas, or it's idea space and stuff like that. The saint is a stop. The saint is a church, and it's a small church. And he's inside, and he's beside the altar, and yeah, it's a stop. It's a nice church. The fortunate is at the back, beside the sun, in front of the sun. So if I'm just walking with the sun, she won't be there. But if I am walking with her, she will be there, and the sun. And it's like there's a rail at the back, so you know you can't fall off the train. And she would just shower me with her blessings and stuff from above coming down, and to feel the sun and the heat, and very lovely and all that. Really nice. The witch is a room, and I go in, and it's a witch, and there's like potions and you know, all those typical things, like there's skulls and there's shelves of magic stuff, and, you know, powders and incense and all that kind of thing. Cool room. The giver's on top of the train, and I would go up out of the carriages, up on top of one of the carriages to talk to him, and he just stands there and he talks quite strangely. The moon is the moon. It would be a nighttime journey. I would wait outside. You know, I would go outside. Not necessarily stop, maybe where I would see the sun. And the fortunate, something similar to that. The fixer is in the bar, and the fixer doesn't, is at a table on his own, looking out the window, doesn't really want to be disturbed, wants to be left alone, and very short in what he says, very coarse, very blunt, very to the bone, and just sits there at his own table at the end of the restaurant carriage near the bar, and there's just one seat in front of him that I would go and talk to him. The lovers is a room with a bed with the red sheet, and there with the blue carpets, exactly as it is on the card. Thinker, he would be knocking around the restaurant as well, the restaurant carriage, but he also have his room, which it says very similar to the other ones, where it's just a desk and books and stuff like that. But he has like statue of a head on his desk. That's the only thing that I can kind of feel. But he's always writing. He's always doing stuff. The Chaste is her own, has her own room, and it's just like the pew, and she's sitting looking at a cross on the wall. It's not necessarily a Christian cross. It's actually fairly similar to the Gila one, just like, like a same length either way, not like the way the Christian one has the long and the thing. It's like you know what I'm saying. That thing rather than that thing. The Levitator, it's a blue room and he levitates in it. It's not that, I suppose, not exciting. He probably should, when I think of it, be outside the train. I'll try him outside the train because that would make more sense to rise above it all from that way. The Dancer is a stop, and it rains, and she's there. I'm going to go dancing. I'm going to get wet. And that's them all. Now, as always, I must preface it. Not preface this because I must postface it by saying this is just how I work. This isn't the way the 40 Servants work. You can do whatever. You can not be on a train. You can be wherever you want. You can just have the exact same room and they come in and talk to you. If you don't have to do any of this thing at all. It's just what I do. That if I go and talk to them, or go and want to have a conversation, want to sort things out, that's what I do. I will get on this train, and most of this happens just before I go to sleep. And I will sometimes just get on the train and just go into my own cabin and chill out. Again, if I need healing, I'll go to the healers and go to sleep there, or can have a chat about certain different things. And I find that over the time that I've done this, that they do seem to have that thing that I talked about earlier on, where they're doing their own thing, and it's not necessarily me saying, answering myself back. Ultimately, it is, but it feels mighty different. That's the only way I get the feeling of it. And their advice is mostly, or at times it would be advice that I wouldn't give myself. So there's that, and it's probably easier for me to take from, outside kind of ideas than my own thing. But definitely worth trying. Look up, active imagination or journeying. Some people like doing it with, music or with a drum beat or something. Best to keep your eyes covered in some way. Some people use their arms, some people use blindfold. It's okay for me because, as I say, most of the time I'm doing it just before I go to sleep so the room is dark. But if I was doing it during the day, if I was doing it, I would cover my eyes in some way. So, yeah. So that was the Tommy Kelly podcast just again. And if you liked it, well, there's plenty more of them. You just have to go to adventuresinwoobu.com and click on the podcast section and you'll see them all now. It's on SoundCloud as well, and it's on YouTube. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud or on iTunes or whatever, there is a video version on YouTube that you can check out. And if you're on YouTube, looking at me and you'd say, I just prefer to listen to us, then it's on iTunes and it's on SoundCloud, and there's an RSS feed for it and all that kind of thing. It's on all the podcatcher things. What's the one I use? I can play something, is it? I can't remember. But yeah, and if you want to know more about the 40 Servants, then you can go to the40servants.com and all the information will be there, including how to use the 40 Servants without ever spending a penny on anything, There's loads of free resources, that you can check out now and just use straight away. All the images, what they look like, their sigils, all that kind of thing. So anything that we did today, talked about today with the active imagination, you can totally do without having to buy or spend money. I'm on Twitter, which is @Tommy Kelly. There's an Adventures in Woobu Facebook page. There is a 40 Servants group. There is loads of stuff. The best thing probably to do is just go to adventuresinwoobu.com and all of the information is there that you would possibly need. So, good people of the internet, I hope in some way me talking about an imaginary train has given you some sort of insight or maybe some sort of push to do something similar. I find it very rewarding, and hopefully you will too. But if it just sounds ludicrous to you, just forget I ever mentioned anything and go about your day. So be well.